The Houston Astros and the Philadelphia Phillies are set to square off in the World Series starting Wednesday. Who has the upper hand? We'll talk about that and more in this episode of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast, a World Series preview today. Without further ado, let's get into it. First of all, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening to this episode. Your support means a lot to me as I move the mic closer to my face. If you're not watching on YouTube, feel free to do so. You can find us on YouTube, Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast. You can find us on Instagram, Lots of Thoughts Sports, TikTok, the same thing. You can find us on Twitter at LOT Sports Pod, on Facebook, Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast over there. You can find us on LinkedIn if you really want to, or you can visit our website, lotsofthoughts.godaddysite.com. There you can access the podcast, the newsletter, the YouTube, the Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, the merchandise, all on the website there. Feel free to check it out. Lotsofthoughts.godaddysite.com. All these links are in the description, whether you're watching the video on YouTube or you're listening on an audio platform. The links are down in the description of this episode. So the World Series is here, and my prediction was horrible. I think I had the Yankees against the Braves going in the World Series, and of course I'm a homer. I was always going to pick the Yankees, but the NL didn't shake up like I thought it would. I had the Astros and the Yankees in the ALCS. All, truths be told, and you can go back and watch a previous playoff preview video that I put out. But I definitely didn't have the Phillies and the Padres, and who really did, right? This was the story of two underdogs on one side and the story of two juggernauts on the other. And we have a World Series matchup that's very much a David and Goliath situation. And so I wanted to talk about the World Series, the series leading up into that, and what that means for those four teams, and especially the two teams involved in the World Series. First of all, let's talk about the NLCS. We had the Phillies and the Padres. It ended up being a pretty easy series for the Phillies, winning in 5. I think this was always a situation where the Padres were I shouldn't say a victim. They were, in a good situation because of circumstance. They played the Dodgers. They played well against the Dodgers for 4 games, and they eliminated them. They played the Mets. They played well against the Mets for 3 games, and they eliminated them. Of course, in reverse order there, but they made it to the NLCS, and sometimes your luck runs dry, especially when you're missing a top 3 player on your team. At the end of the day, whether you believe in the Padres starting pitching and Yu Darvish and Blake Snell and Joe Musgrove and etc., at the end of the day, that team is going to rest on the laurels of Manny Machado, Juan Soto, and Fernando Tatis Jr. And getting Juan Soto certainly makes the loss of Fernando Tatis Jr. for the year due to PEDs a lighter blow, and that's why they made it that far. If they don't trade for Soto, I don't think they make it that far, but it's clear Tatis is needed. It's clear that depth is needed, and I'm a big, Kim fan. Their interim shortstop for the time being, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his first name, but wonderful player out of the KBO. I actually really hope the Yankees sign him. In all full honesty, he's a high defensive value guy that could be a great player off the bench. But at the end of the day, Fernando Tatis Jr. is a top 10 player in baseball, in my opinion. And Manny Machado's an NL MVP candidate. Juan Soto is a top 5 player in baseball, position player, I should say, in baseball. So these 3 are going to carry you here, throughout the regular season and the playoffs. And the depth of the lineup is good as well, right? Josh Bell was there. I don't know if he's a free agent or not. I'm not really sure of his contract situation. Starting pitching, I previously mentioned Josh Hader at the back of the bullpen. Various other guys that contribute to their success. Jake Cronenworth, Brandon Drury. They had a lot of depth in the regular season. But at the end of the day, they were one piece short. And it was a good run for them. I liked it a lot for the Padres. They're a young team, and this really showed that they're ready to compete. And in the next round, or the next year, we're going to see Fernando Tatis back, hopefully healthy, hopefully ready to go. We could see what that lineup is truly ready to produce, because you only have 2 more years of Juan Soto. I talked about this when Juan Soto got traded. You have 3 kicks at the can, and Fernando Tatis being immature and taking PEDs cost you one of those. So you got 2 more. Let's see what you got next year. On the other side, the Phillies just outclassed them. They have an offense that's firing on all cylinders. There was a much ado about their defense coming into this season, with Nick Castellanos and Kyle Schwarber set to play a large portion of outfield minutes. Didi Gregorius was awful in the infield. Their third base options weren't great either. Rhys Hoskins isn't a thriller at first either. So, they had certain weaknesses, and those didn't rear their ugly head in the playoffs so far, and maybe they will in the World Series. But at the end of the day, they signed many of these guys and brought many of these guys in because their bats are incredible. You know, Didi Gregorius aside, and I love Didi, but his bat's been awful since he had Tommy John. Rhys Hoskins and Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos, these guys that I mentioned as poor defenders, their bats were on fire in the playoffs. I mean, Schwarber, Hoskins, and Harper are the main reason the Phillies are here. And you could say, well, they're starting pitching. You could say they're, Real Muto and Brandon Marsh and, other acquisitions really played a role. Nate Vierling and Bryson Stott, who we could go down the list. But at the end of the day, this team is based on the core of their offense, and that was fueled by Harper, Schwarber, and Rhys Hoskins when it mattered most. And boy, M&T Bank Stadium, it's electric. Is that what it's called? M&T Bank? Why am I blanking? I'm now gonna have to look up the name of the Phillies stadium. Citizens Bank. Where's M&T Bank? Is that a football stadium? That really feels like a football stadium. Okay, it's where the Ravens play. Gotcha. Okay. I feel less bad because at least it's a stadium. But I was a little bit off there. Either way, the Phillies stadium was nuts. It was incredible. Citizens Bank was alive and well. And when Harper signed there years ago, he always said that he loved the passion coming from the Phillies fans when he was a National. And at the time, I didn't buy it, maybe because I wanted him to sign with the Yanks. But you could feel it. You could feel the pandemonium whenever anything happened in the game, and it's incredible. They're very happy for the citizens of that city. Maybe I don't like the 76ers too much because their history with Nets trades, but the Phillies are an easy team to root for in my mind, and so I'm excited to see them move on. And the other side, you had two juggernauts, right? You had the New York Yankees and the Houston Astros, really the class of the AL since 2017. I know the Yankees have dipped a little bit. You had Red Sox years and Rays years where they made runs to the World Series, but for the most part, it's been Yankees and Astros through these past 6 years. And the Astros outclassed the Yankees, as much as it hurts to say. If you're watching on YouTube, you see my Yankees stuff in the background. You know I'm a Yankees fan if you've been listening long enough, or if you know me personally. But it hurt. It hurt to say. But the Yankees, they're not better than the Astros in any way, shape, or form. Their offense was worse than the Astros, and that's with Alvarez and Altuve having awful series, like awful. They were both bad. Altuve had one of the worst playoff starts in terms of his over streak in MLB history. But they still had to run him out there because what other option? I mean, he's the heart and soul of the team. You can't bench him. You just have to hope he figures it out. And they're gonna, he ended up coming around toward the end of that series, but they're gonna need him, obviously, continuing later on. But Yordan Alvarez and Altuve being quelled still wasn't debilitating for the Astros. Guys like Alex Bregman, guys like Kyle Tucker, guys like Jeremy Pena, the ALCS MVP, guys like Chas McCormick, guys like Martin Maldonado, Trey Mancini, Christian Vasquez. They made incredible, Yuli Gurriel, they made incredible marks throughout this series. And the Astros talent up and down is just incredible. They're starting pitching. I mean, you go from Verlander to Valdez to McCullers, like that's a great top three. Nevertheless, Christian Javier, man in game 4. I guess it was game 3 because of McCullers' injury, but that's besides the point. And then their bullpen's incredible too. The Astros are an incredibly well-run organization from top to bottom, and the Yankees, they've got some major holes. They made what we call a patchwork trade to get Josh Donaldson and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa from the Twins and have them play the left side of the infield while you wait for your young guys, your prospects in Volpe and Peraza to make it up to the majors. And both of them were awful throughout the year. I think Donaldson, the Yankees expected to come around, but I think the Yankees never expected IKF to come around. I think it was a lot of gaslighting, which is a term I'm stealing from Brian Hoke, MLB writer, or I should say writer for the MLB.com covering the Yankees. They gaslighted the IKF situation, hoping that he would come around, and he never did. And they knew he wasn't good. They knew he wasn't starting caliber for a World Series championship aspiring team. And it bit him in the butt. He made horrible decisions, horrible plays down the stretch of that series that really cost them. And it was evidenced in the previous series when they benched him to play Oswaldo Cabrera at short and bring in Aaron Hicks in left field, that they were not comfortable with him at short. And then Hicks gets hurt, and then all of a sudden we have a merry-go-round between IKF and Oswald Peraza and Oswaldo Cabrera at short. It was a situation where continuity wasn't enough. I shouldn't say, let me rephrase that, where continuity wasn't there, and that caused problems. You can't say continuity wasn't enough. There was no continuity. It's a horrible situation, and that, along with major parts of the lineup disappearing. Aaron Judge, I just have to say, I love Judge. Absolutely love Judge. He's my favorite player, probably my favorite baseball player of all time. It's between him and A-Rod. But the chase for 62 really cost him in the playoffs when it mattered most. You could see through the last 2 weeks of the season, he was cold, he was pressing, trying to get that home run, swinging out of his shoes, getting pissed off. And then they benched him after the home run with only 1 game left in the season, and he was just as cold in the playoffs. Just strikeout after strikeout. And that's what you get with Judge a lot of times when he's cold. But he's not cold very often, and he wasn't cold for 95% of the season. And I have to think if he was at 45 home runs, he probably performs better in the postseason because they bench him 3 out of 10 games leading up into the playoffs to give him some rest, to not have him worrying about his at-bats as much. And that cost him, and it sucks. It really does. It's a record that's going to live on forever, but it's a situation where you're screwed over by that same record. And the Yankees have a lot of questions to answer in the offseason. Who's going to play shortstop for them next season? Who's going to play left field for them next season with Benintendi's free agency? Their pitching showed up for the most part, but they just were outclassed by the Astros through and through, and they're going to need major changes if they want to compete in the future. So now we have a World Series. We have on one side the 7th seed. Let me remind you, the Phillies went against the 3rd seed in the first round. They were the last team to clinch a wild card berth, and the Houston Astros, who had the 2nd best record in Major League Baseball, just behind the Dodgers. 2 teams that couldn't be further apart. And you have a lot of the country rooting one way or the other. There's very passionate sides to this. People who feel the Astros don't deserve that glory because they're, cheating with the sign stealing issues. There's also people who don't like the Phillies, don't like guys like Harper. It's a very drastic difference. And I think there's going to be key points to look forward to doing this series. First of all, the obvious one, it's the Astros starting pitching depth versus the lineup. When games 3 and games 4 run around, when McCullers and Javier go to get starts, how are they going to fare against the big bats in the Phillies lineup? Because, credit to the Yankees, credit to, who did the Astros face before that? The Mariners. Those are 2 good offenses. The Phillies offense is something else right now. When you have, I don't know what their lineup they're going to run out is going to be, but let's take their top 6 guys, right? You have Harper, not in any particular order, Harper, Schwarber, Castellanos, Real Muto, Hoskins, and Marsh, right? And it may not even be their top 6 in their order, like I said. But those are 6 guys that are impact bats. You look at the Yankees lineup, who's their 6th best batter? You have obviously Judge, Rizzo, Stanton, Gleyber Torres. From there, who are we looking at? Harrison Bader was good, but who's next? Josh Donaldson? Oswaldo Cabrera? I mean, a great rookie, but nothing like, any of the talent that I just mentioned for the Phillies. This is a deep lineup, and it's going to be interesting to me to see where the matchups lie, because at the end of the day, the Houston rotation is deeper. The Phillies have 2 strong starters in, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on their names, in Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. But past that, it's a little suspect. And so where the advantage should be is with Houston and their 3 and 4 starters. How will they match up against the top bats in the Philly lineup? That's my curiosity. And then on the other side, it's the Phillies bullpen versus the Houston Astros lineup. So guys like Yordan Alvarez and Jose Altuve, who are cold, or Bregman and Tucker and Yuli Gurriel, who are a little bit hotter, and Jeremy Pena. Oh my God. How are these relievers like Zach Eflin, like David Robertson, how are they going to feel? How are they going to feel? How are they going to fare against these guys that are hot and these guys that have been cold? Are they going to keep the cold guys cold, and are they going to be able to stymie the hot players and make sure that they don't make a huge impact early in that series. So the two real matchups I'm looking for. Overall, there should, it should be a very fun series to watch. If I had to pick right now, I'm taking Houston in 6. But you never know. Philly's on a magical run behind Rob Thompson. That's been an incredible story to see. Good for him. I really loved him when he was a coach with the Yankees. So good to see him, leading his team to success. One more thing on Jeremy Pena that I think other teams should notice. The Astros aren't an incredibly high payroll team, right? I believe I could look up where they rank 2022 MLB teams by payroll. But if I'm not mistaken, they're around like 8th. They're not incredibly high in the payroll rankings. And we've seen in recent years, they definitely haven't been eager to retain their stars. So in 2022, according to BetMGM, they were 9th. So it goes Mets, Dodgers. This is old because I know the Dodgers were ahead of the Mets. I'm going to use a different website because I don't trust this. Okay, Spot Track. There we go. That's a reliable source. 2023 payroll. Let me pull it to 2022. We have the Mets, the Dodgers. Wow, the Mets were ahead of the Dodgers. The Mets, Dodgers, Yankees, Phillies, Padres, Red Sox, White Sox, Braves, Astros. So 9th overall. So we have the 4th team and the 9th team left in terms of payroll. The Astros didn't want to pay George Springer. They let him walk to Toronto, rather. They didn't want to pay Garrett Cole, so they let him walk to the Yankees. They didn't want to pay Carlos Correa, so they let him walk to the Twins. Year after year, they make it clear that they're willing to let guys walk and not willing to retain guys if their price point is above what they're expecting. And it helps when you could call up guys, right? When George Springer leaves in free agency, but Kyle Tucker emerged the year before, and Chas McCormick makes an impact in center field. And when Carlos Correa leaves in free agency, you have Jeremy Pena take over and win an ALCS MVP. When Garrett Cole leaves, you have Framber Valdez, be an AL Cy Young candidate. When you have an organization that's great at development, you can afford to let big free agents walk every once in a while. At the end of the day, the teams that made it deep into the playoffs were top payroll teams. Let me go down the list for you. First of all, the Mets made the playoffs. Dodgers made the playoffs. Yankees made the playoffs. Phillies made the playoffs. Padres made the playoffs. Red Sox, well, that's a different story. White Sox, that's a different story. Braves made the playoffs. Astros made the playoffs. Angels did not. Blue Jays made the playoffs. Cardinals made the playoffs. So out of the top 12 teams there in payroll, the only ones that didn't make the playoffs were the Astros, the White Sox, and the Angels, the White Sox, and the Red Sox. The other teams that made the payroll, that made the playoffs, Cleveland Guardians ranked 28th. Seattle Mariners ranked 21st. So you definitely have a few outliers, but for the most part, the teams that are high payroll do well, and the teams that are low payroll don't. And maybe that's an indicator of the teams that are bad don't want to spend. You can look at it both ways. But at the end of the day, if teams are determined to set a price and let a free agent walk, they have to be ready to replace them with development players. And you saw that in the ALCS in comparison to the Yankees. The Yankees wanted to keep IKF around to play short because they weren't ready to bring up their young guys and develop them. Well, you didn't give Peraza enough time in the majors. He wasn't ready for this series. Unlike the Astros, who gave Jeremy Pena every chance to win the starting job, and he's the ALCS MVP, right? You need to give young players some time to develop. And if you don't, you better be prepared to retain your free agents, in the meantime. So that's all I have to say about the World Series today. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. I'm ready for the series to get started. Really excited to see how this one shakes out. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast. If you enjoyed the content, the links are in the description to all the socials, including the website, the newsletter, the podcast, the YouTube, the merchandise, the Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever I didn't mention there. Check all those out, links in the description. Thank you very much for watching this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, click the like button on YouTube or hit the subscribe button down below. Click the bell and you'll get notified whenever a new video comes out. If you're on an audio platform, rate us to 5 stars, hit subscribe, download our latest episodes. Thank you very much for watching this episode, and have a wonderful rest of your day.